The list is here.
International cooperation, affairs and international cooperation, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Relations and Cooperation, Cabinet Secretary, Foreign Affairs.
Okay.
Done.
Done.
That's done.
Wait.
Permanent representative. Director. In the PR. You see this?
May write, please write there. You write there. You may write there.
To the ambassador or what? And the and what? And then else? What else?
Instead of this one.
I did that one. Okay. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Your Excellency, you are most welcomed to Munyonyo. You are most welcomed to the 9th Ministerial Meeting of the African Union Committee of the 10 Heads of State and Government on the Reform of the United Nations Security Council here in Kampala. Your Excellency, before I proceed, I have the distinct honor to introduce my colleagues, ministers and delegations who are here. Let me begin with my colleague, His Excellency Professor David Francis, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Sierra Leone and the C10 Coordinator Chair. Is here with us. We have with us Her Excellency Honorable Netumbo Nandi Ndawa, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of Namibia. So, from Equatorial Guinea, we're expecting His Excellency Honorable Simon Onyono Esono Agu, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, who will be with us here later in the afternoon. Present here is us from the Republic of Congo, my dear brother, His Excellency Jean-Claude Gakoso, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Congo. I also have here from Kenya, my dear sister, Honorable Ambassador Rachel Omano, Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs. From Libya, we have Mr. Mohammed Issa, Under Secretary for Political Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the State of Libya. And from Zambia, we have my distinguished sister, Ms. Isabel Lemba, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From Algeria, we have His Excellency Salah Francis Hehadi, Ambassador of the Democratic Republic of Algeria in Addis Ababa. From Senegal, we have His Excellency Chike Niag, the Permanent Representative of the Republic of Senegal to the United Nations in New York. And from the African Union, Your Excellency is Mr. Bakole Adioe, the AU Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. Your Excellency, yesterday there was the officials meeting of the meeting relating to the reform of the UN by the senior officials from the different governments and countries have just announced their leaders here. Your Excellency, the meeting was colorful, fruitful, and some concrete decisions were reached. Consensus was reached on the way forward. And today, I'm happy, Your Excellency, to see you here. And on behalf of the entire colleague ministers who are here, I would like to thank you very much for taking time out to be with us here to welcome us and make a speech at this important meeting of ministers, which will start after this function. Your Excellency, the program is short. We will start with what happened to the program? Your Excellency, this morning we'll start by a statement from Ambassador Mankole Adioe, the African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs and Peace and Security. Thereafter, the coordinator and co-chair, His Excellency Professor David John Francis, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Sierra Leone, will make a statement. I will then come in, Your Excellency, just to make a brief statement and welcome you, and thereafter, Your Excellency, you'll be able to make your speech, and soon after that, the ministers will go and start their deliberation. I once more thank you, Your Excellency, for coming. On behalf of my colleagues, Your Excellency, these are hard times of COVID, and I'd like to reassure my colleagues that in Uganda we have something called the SOP, Standard Operating Procedures, and if and when you are advised or informed of what is SOP, I kindly, with due respect, ask you to follow those procedures. It is in the Bible, it's said somewhere, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Therefore, in order to observe and respect the SOP, you will ensure that your neighbor is safe as much as yourself, you are safe. You're most welcome. May I take this opportunity now to welcome Ambassador Bakole of the African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs and Peace and Security to make his statement. You're welcome, Mr. Ambassador.
Excellency Yoweri Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, and our distinguished host. Excellencies, foreign ministers here present, Excellencies, ambassadors, permanent representatives, ladies and gentlemen. At the onset, permit me, Excellencies, to convey the cordial greetings of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, and to profoundly thank Your Excellency, President Museveni, the government and the people of the Republic of Uganda for hosting this very critical meeting at this beautiful resort. The serenity of the banks of the Lake Victoria is inspiring, and we hope will guide our discussions today. Let me acknowledge, Excellency, your personal dedicated leadership, which testifies to the keenness of Uganda in fostering our common aspiration. Equally, I salute the courage of His Excellency, your brother, President Julius Maada Bio, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, and coordinator of the Committee of the 10, for his leadership and legitimate commitment to the reform of the United Nations Security Council. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today's meeting definitely affords us the window to renew our commitments and strengthen our strategies to accelerate the process of reforming the United Nations Security Council. The collective voice of the African Union membership in its entirety continues to convey a strong global message of substance, a message of genuine partnership, a message that demonstrates the belief in the multilateral system, particularly the platform of the United Nations. Today, we know for sure, Excellencies, that the United Nations Security Council is a moribund reflection of the world. It does not take into cognizance the global south. Its representation is not inclusive. Indeed, in the age of the global acclaim for inclusive representation at our national level about women and youth and children, the United Nations has remained very, very archaic. The Commission, therefore, stands to continue to urge this Committee of 10 to remain committed to the Museveni Consensus and to the SALT Declaration. Most urgently, Africa must stay the course. Africa must not relent in this long-drawn process of reforming this intergovernmental body. Today, Africa and the entire world face a paradox where the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council are reluctant to engage on the way forward. The leading advanced economies of the world preach and serve as champions of democracy, of freedom, and good governance. However, the most strategic mechanism for peace and security in the globe is not reflective of the reality. Excellencies, I make bold pronouns, with your permission, that the global governance must change, and it must change for good. Multilateral governance must be good, it must be effective, and overall must be seen to be fair, equitable, and just. The historic injustice of colonialism, of oppression, of imperialism, and apartheid, and indeed pre-independence subjugation, must give way to an inclusive and smart partnership. Africa must remain seized of this matter. Excellencies, regrettably, the failure of the international political and economic system is that the governance structures, including the UN Security Council, still mirrors the post-immediate Second World War scenario. It is for this reason that the San Francisco Agreement that led to the UN Charter did not represent and does not today represent our aspirations. Your Excellencies, we are all aware that over 60% of the discussions in the United Nations Security Council still about African conflicts and African conflict management and resolution. Despite the involvement of many African Union member states, including Uganda, in the maintenance and contribution to international peace and security since independence, Africa continues to be marginalized. the visionary aspirations of our leaders, including your good self, Excellency, and Agenda 2063, the ambition for sustainable development cannot be realized without Africa's very strong voice. It is in this context, generally within the AU, within the UN, Africa and Africans must continue to make their mark. Africa's visibility is gradually being enhanced and lead roles being played in silencing the guns, in peace operations, in the right to development, in disarmament, and so forth. It is therefore self-evident, Excellencies, that the international rules-based order must reflect the adequate representation and effective participation of the African Union member states. We stand on the Museveni consensus. This African position remains very core to this ideal. It is for this reason that the Commission encourages all members of the C10 to continue the dialogue and to continue to push and promote Africa's common collective interests. Excellencies, as I end, let me make it clear that we are pushing in the Commission with your leadership for the strategic platform of the United Nations Security Council to reflect the current global realities. This, for us, is a wake-up call. We therefore encourage and boldly, with conviction, call on this committee to continue to push for this message. A more inclusive, a more representative, a more accountable, a more legitimate, a more democratic, a more open, transparent, effective, fair-minded United Nations Security Council. Let us reinvigorate the debate, Excellencies, on the reform of the United Nations Security Council. We must not waver, nor totter, indeed, nor slumber. As stated by our iconic African personality, late Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. United Nations reform process is possible. As the African Union anthem, which we just listened to, reflects, let us defend our liberty and our unity, the preservation of African solidarity and unity in this venture for the reform of the United Nations Security Council is to reflect a true African voice that is fundamentally loud and clear. Once again, Excellencies, I thank you for listening to the statement by the Chairperson of the Commission.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Ambassador Bankole Adioe, African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. I have the distinct honor now to invite my dear brother and Minister, Professor David John Francis, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Sierra Leone and Coordinator of the C10. You're most welcome, Mr. Minister.
Your Excellency, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, Honorable General J.J. Donga Abubakar, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Uganda, Excellencies, colleague foreign ministers, Excellencies, permanent representatives, Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the African Union Commission, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I bring you warm greetings and message of goodwill and support from the coordinator of the African Union Committee of 10 Heads of State and Government on the reform of the United Nations Security Council, His Excellency, Dr. Julius Maada Bio, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. Your Excellency, President Yoweri Museveni, your brother and colleague, whom you have adopted as your political son, His Excellency, President Julius Maada Bio, has asked me to convey to you, and through you, his deep appreciation to the government and people of the Republic of Uganda for graciously hosting the 9th ministerial level meeting of the African Union Committee of 10 Member States on the reform of the United Nations Security Council. Your Excellency, let me, on behalf of my colleague foreign ministers, extend profound thanks and appreciation to the government and people of Uganda for the warm and excellent hospitality extended to our delegations since our arrival in this beautiful and historic capital city of Kampala. The hosting of this ministerial meeting by Uganda not only demonstrates the generosity of the people of Uganda, but also Your Excellency's personal and unwavering commitment to the C10 reform process and to the African unity, and in particular, African common solidarity. But Your Excellency, I humbly speak on behalf of colleague ministers and permanent representatives to say that now we know the source of your governance inspiration. You cannot sit on the banks of the great and legendary Lake Victoria, the source of the Nile, without being inspired. So we are inspired today and will continue the work. Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, this meeting is convened ahead of the forthcoming 35th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union. As ministers of the AU member states whose heads of state are charged with the responsibility of promoting and canvassing support for the common African position, our deliberations will take stock and examine recent developments on the process of the UN Security Council reform, including the outcome of the meetings of the Intergovernmental Negotiations, the IGN, since our last reporting of progress made so far, and to share perspectives on ways to further advance the committee's mandate in canvassing the common African position as espoused in the Museveni Consensus and the SAC Declaration. Ultimately, Your Excellency, we will accordingly report to our heads of state on the way forward. Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, the C10 was given a clear mandate by the highest authority of the African Union almost 17 years ago. Accordingly, the heads of state of our 10 countries were given the weighty responsibility to canvass, promote, and advance the common African position as set out in the Museveni Consensus and the SAC Declaration. This is our instruction. This is our mandate. So, Your Excellency, please permit me to restate the much talked about common African position. Simply and importantly, in advancing the reform of the United Nations Security Council agenda and the C10 process, Africa is simply demanding and requesting for 1, 2 seats in the permanent category of the United Nations Security Council with all the prerogatives, the privileges and rights, including the veto, if retained in the reform process. Second, Africa is demanding and requesting for 2 additional seats in the non-permanent category of the UN Security Council. Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, recognizing that substantial progress has been made in canvassing and promoting the UN reform agenda, and in particular the African Common Position in relation to the significant developments in the intergovernmental negotiation process, we all present here today will want to know what we expect out of this 9th ministerial level meeting of the C10 member states. And in this regard, Your Excellency, I would like to highlight, for and on behalf of His Excellency, President Dr. Julius Maada Bio, the coordinator of C10, what the expectations are of this ministerial level meeting. First, that we uphold the intergovernmental negotiation process as the only viable option. In other words, the intergovernmental negotiation mechanism should be the main and legitimate channel for the reform discussions. Second, to underscore the need to continue to uphold consensus on the common African position as the legitimate and inevitable pathway to addressing the historic injustice inherent in Africa's non-representation and underrepresentation in the permanent and non-permanent categories of the UN Security Council, respectively. Third, to ensure that the C10 member states remain vigilant and mindful of attempts to undermine the common African position. Fourth, to continue to emphasize the imperative to correctly reference the Museveni consensus and the SADC declaration in all the IGN statements and pronouncements as the fundamental pillars of the common African position. Fifth, to uphold the imperative to continue to canvass and promote the UN Security Council reform agenda as mandated by the African Union, and to mobilize and protect the integrity of the common African position based on the fundamental pillars of the Museveni consensus and SADC declaration. And sixth, given the fact that progress has been made in the intergovernmental negotiation process, Your Excellency, and cognizance of the fact that any form of global reform is not a quick fix process, we are of the view that now is not the time to push for a text-based negotiation, as this will undermine the unity and consensus already achieved. So, Your Excellency, let me, on behalf of my colleague foreign ministers and permanent representatives in particular, to thank our hard-working permanent representatives and experts in New York and in Addis Ababa for their continued demonstration of commitment and devotion to the UN Security Council reform process. I am aware that many hours of hard and diligent work have been dedicated to the reform process, including yesterday's senior officials meeting that will guide our deliberations today. Your Excellency, it is important to note that despite the disruptive impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Committee of 10 continued to consult and reach out in pursuit of its mandate. Last year, the COVID-19 pandemic did not permit a physical meeting, but we, however, held a virtual ministerial meeting level on the 26th of January 2021. Furthermore, the coordinator, His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio, at every given opportunity during interactions with his colleagues, seized the opportunity to canvass and promote the common African position on the reform of the United Nations Security Council. Your Excellency, distinguished delegates, redressing the historical injustice that excludes and underrepresents Africa from the permanent and non-permanent category of the Security Council remains a matter of grave concern and great urgency, not only to the African continent, but for our forefathers of the Pan-African ideal and aspiration, for which, Your Excellency, you are a living symbol of that aspiration. As we all know, the present configuration of the United Nations Security Council, as it stands, is reminiscent of bygone eras and undermines the credibility of the United Nations Security Council itself, as long as these iniquities in its structure remain. Yet, the UN Security Council reform continues to protract into convolutions of interest, serving only to delay justice for Africa. This amounts to the perpetuation of the status quo. And in the words of the C10 Coordinator, President Julius Maada Bio, during his address to the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly, I quote, "Africa's patience is being tested." Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, notwithstanding the challenges in the reform process, we acknowledge the broad support by UN member states for the legitimate aspiration of Africa to play its rightful role on the global stage. We once again thank those member states that have recognized and continue to support our call for a redress of our demand for equitable representation. Our duty is to build on this broad support and to ensure that they translate into viable means of reforming the UN Security Council in order to make it more broadly representative, democratic, legitimate, transparent, accountable, and efficient. And we can only do so by speaking with one voice, in unison and cohesive manner, as the heads of states have always advised us. Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, I have no doubt that our enduring resilience as Africans is our strongest asset that will lead us to that defining moment when Africa takes its rightful place in the permanent category of the United Nations Security Council and end the process whereby 73% of the issues dealt with at the UN Security Council revolve around Africa and African issues, but Africa is not represented. Your Excellency, we are on a quest for justice. Our resolve has been tested and we have remained resolute and resilient. So let me use this opportunity to continue to re-echo the AU's call to all member states to remain cohesive on all aspects of the UN reform process and to continue to speak with one voice, with unity of purpose, until the demands of the common African position are achieved. And finally, on behalf of colleague ministers and permanent representatives, let me thank you, Your Excellency, most profoundly for making the time to grace this occasion with your presence. This is a demonstration of inspiring leadership and your commitment to peace, security, and stability in Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, colleague and brother minister, Professor David John Francis, for your statement, elaborated statement during this function. Your Excellency, before I invite you, Your Excellency, let me just, I have an apology to make. I have another minister here, my colleague, Minister John Mulimba, our Minister of State for Regional Cooperation, is also present with us here. Your Excellency, my sincere apologies. Your Excellency, let me thank you very much and welcome you once more. I want to thank Your Excellency for your support and assistance to ensure that this meeting did take place amongst all the other challenges that COVID brought and among other challenges that we had in order to organize this meeting. I'd like to thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your assistance and thorough support in ensuring that meeting takes place. Soon after the President makes his statement, we'll have the national anthem. Then I'll invite the heads of delegation for a photo session with the President just right here, following the standard operating procedures. We will be invited to take a photo with the President before the President departs for other assignments. I have the distinct honor to invite Your Excellency to make your statement. You're most welcome, Mr. President.
The Honorable Ministers, the Coordinator of the C10, the Honorable Minister from Sierra Leone, officials, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you, the foreign ministers of the brother African countries of the Committee of 10 for the reform of the UN Security Council to your brother country, Uganda. In order to inform your brother people of Uganda who may be listening or watching this function, the Committee of 10 is comprised of the following brother African countries: Senegal, Uganda, Algeria, Kenya, Zambia, Sierra Leone, Congo, Libya, Namibia, and Equatorial Guinea. In March 2005, the African Union appointed the members of the Committee of 10 Heads of State and Government, abbreviated as C10, with the mandate to advocate and canvass for the African Common Position on the reform of the United Nations Security Council. Indeed, a consensus was reached at Eswatini in Swaziland, where the brother African countries on the committee agreed as follows. Number one, to promote Africa to be fully represented in all the UN organs, especially the United Nations Security Council. To have 2 permanent seats with 2 veto rights and 2 more non-permanent seats with the UN Security Council as Africa's legitimate right and aspiration to correct the historical injustices endured by the continent. Number 3, the African Union shall be responsible for the selection of African representatives to the UN Security Council. These were very good principles, and there is no useful reason as to why they should be altered or diluted. The UN Security Council should have been and must be reformed. This is not a favor by anybody, but a right of all peoples that inhabit the planet Earth. The international arrangement that was arrived at in 1945 after the devastating inter-imperialist Second World War caused by the greed of the imperialist countries that were vying for colonial possessions, fighting as who should own us, the Africans and the Asians. That's what they were fighting for. When you hear First World War, Second World War, these are inter-imperialist wars. This is the accurate description. Fighting as who should own us, the Africans and the Asians. Having exterminated or enslaved the indigenous peoples of the Americas and Australia and New Zealand, that arrangement of 1945 was temporary because many of us were not in a position to make our own decisions. The Asians and the Africans were in colonial bondage, although we had been used to fight and die in those other people's wars of the imperialists, the first and the second so-called world wars. In the two world wars, more than 3.5 million Africans and 6.5 million Asians, especially Indians, were used in fighting those wars, which were not their wars. Yet, no thought was given to how they would participate in international decision-making. Was the assumption that we would never be free? If that was the assumption, then the assumers were wrong. By both peaceful and violent methods, the countries of Asia and Africa are now free. Even the indigenous peoples of the Americas, Australia, New Zealand, that survived extermination are also beginning to assert themselves, as we have seen in countries like Bolivia, etc. It is therefore a circus to waste time year after year debating the obvious. We demand our right of having permanent seats, not seasonal ones allotted to us by the present and fair system on the UN Security Council. Every reasonable man, as the lawyers say, the lawyers have a good word. They say a reasonable man should understand this, should see this. Every reasonable man, as the lawyers always say, I do not want to bother myself talking of fair-minded man, should see that the 1.4 billion Africans that will be 2.5 billion in the next 29 years, and the billions of Asians, the former colonized peoples, cannot be kept out of the UN Security Council on terms similar to the present 5, USA, China, Russia, Britain, France, that monopolize that body now. There are only a few factors that are delaying the process. Two of them are on our side, the Africans, that have decided to maintain weakness in Africa, even after the colonization of our continent, that started with the independence of the Sudan in 1955. Here in Uganda, we have been battling those internal weaknesses by relying on 4 principles. Principle number 1, patriotism. Down with sectarianism of religion and tribe, and loving Uganda. That's one of the big battles we have been fighting here. Some people trying to promote sectarianism of religion, of tribe, and with the patriots denouncing that treason and insisting on the unity of our people. Pan-Africanism, i.e. loving East Africa, loving Africa, and working for their integration. Socio-economic transformation. Africa cannot remain a pre-industrial society, a society before modern times. And democracy. With these four principles, patriotism, Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, and democracy, we have been able to create a chapter of some capacity. We have some capacity here. We don't need the United Nations to come and defend us. We can defend ourselves. Similar chapters exist and have existed in Africa since independence. That is how, for instance, countries like Tanzania, under Mwalimu Nyerere, Zambia, under Mzee Kaunda, Botswana, under Mzee Seretse Khama. The word Mzee means the elder. Those who don't know Swahili, Mzee means the elder. Algeria, under Houari Boumediene, Egypt, under Gamal Abdel Nasser, and Guinea-Conakry, under Sékou Touré, were able to support the anti-colonial armed struggle that defeated Portuguese colonialism in Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, and Sao Tome, defeat the Ian Smith regime in Zimbabwe, what was called Rhodesia, defeat the racists in Namibia, and defeat the racists in South Africa, working with the African liberation movements of those countries. This shows that once the Africans get together, not all of them even, some of them, there's nothing that we cannot solve. Because this is an example. Who defeated the Portuguese colonialists in Africa? It was the African countries supporting the freedom fighters, supported by some few friends in the world. But we did it. Our elders actually did it. And at that time, they had much less capacity than what we have now. This means that the potential is there if we act right and together. The problem of Idi Amin and such other problems were similarly solved by the African actors. Idi Amin was a problem. Who solved the problem of Idi Amin? When you see the people of Uganda coming up now, standing, the economy growing, population growing. Population of Uganda was 10 million that time. It's now 43 million. Many of them, since the time of the NRM, our party, our movement, when we came into power, because children were vaccinated, that's how the population exploded. But who solved the problem of Idi Amin? It was not external people, it was our people. Ugandans plus a few brothers, not even many, a few. Tanzania, Zambia. That time we had Mozambique had come, Angola, and we solved that problem and other problems which I don't want to go into. The present chaos in some African countries can be solved if the different chapters are able to act together. when you hear the chaos which is in Africa now, country by country, this can be solved. There's nothing that we cannot solve. I'm telling you what I know, because I have been involved for the last 60 years. So the main problem is lack of coordination, lack of cohesion. This is what I'm talking about. Those fellows are playing around with us because we are not cohesive. That's why we are begging, as if we are begging for somebody has stolen my cows, and then I go to beg him, please give me back my cows. I take the cows. I don't beg you. But if you are weak, you beg. Like now we are begging, please. The present chaos in some African countries can be solved if the different chapters are able to act together. There is no adversary that we cannot defeat on the African continent if we act together. I can tell you this. Because in 1963, when our leaders first met in Addis Ababa, at that time I was in the secondary school, the ones who met in Addis Ababa were only 36 countries which had got independence. They are the ones who founded the OAU. That means there was another almost 20 countries of Africa which were not yet free. And in that conference, I remember very well, you know, the problem is that you people, what you call history, me, I call current affairs, because I was there. So in that conference, the African leaders passed a resolution saying that all the African countries must be free, peacefully. And if anybody does not give freedom peacefully, we shall throw him out by war, the armed struggle. Oh, people were laughing at, these are Africans just talking. But our leaders formed a committee of 9. It was called the Committee of 9, just like this one. The Committee of 9 African countries who are members of the Liberation Committee, which was headquartered in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And that one was to coordinate support for the liberation movements in the countries which were occupied by the foreigners. This was 1963. And people were laughing at Africa, what can they do? But by 1974, the African armies in Mozambique, in Angola, in Guinea-Bissau had defeated the Portuguese imperialists. Defeated by war, not talking in the microphones, no. Not only had they defeated the Portuguese army in Africa, but they had also liberated Portugal itself. Portuguese got freedom because of the Africans. Then Ian Smith, 1980, down. Ian Smith had said he would be here for 1,000 years. 1994, the rest, Namibia, 1990. So there's nothing that we cannot do. That's where the problem is. By strengthening ourselves here in Africa, the outsiders will more easily accept not to interfere with our rights. We must be in that Security Council to ensure that it is not used negatively against Africa, and that it is instead used positively for Africa and the rest of the world. When has the UN system been misused to commit aggression against Africa? When? What are the examples where the UN Security Council was misused to the detriment of Africa? I can straight away quote two cases. The murder of Patrice Lumumba in 1961 and the attack on Libya recently. How much chaos have these two mistakes caused in Africa? If you sit down and you think how much chaos has been caused by these two actions, the killing of Patrice Lumumba, 1961, and the attack on Libya recently. All this chaos you are talking about in the Sahel is linked to the problem of Libya. The pharaohs who are dying in the ocean, in the Mediterranean, going to Europe. Many of them were working in Libya. Libya was, although I had problems with Gaddafi, I had to fight Gaddafi 2 times. But he had also his positive points. And many Africans were working in Libya. They were not going to Europe. Now, that little portion of strength has been destabilized, and these Africans are going in the waters. Who is answerable for these two mistakes? When you talk of accountability, who is accountable for all this suffering that has been caused by these mistakes? The attack on Libya, for instance, is definitely behind the chaos in Mali, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, etc. Congo has been in successive problems in the last 60 years. Congo, Kinshasa, DRC. The membership of African countries on a permanent basis would stop these mistakes. How and who should be the members of this body? It is already known that Africa should have 2 members of the Security Council on a permanent basis and another 2 in the non-permanent category. Elected, maybe, I'm having an idea, may be elected every 4 years on a rotational regional basis. These are just my ideas. I don't know whether they were captured in Ezorini, but these are all my ideas. This would mean that for 4 years, we would have 1 country for North Africa and one country from West Africa. Then for the next 4 years cycle, we would have 1 country from Central Africa and 1 country from Southern Africa. Then the next 4 years cycle would have a country from Eastern Africa and another turn for a different country from North Africa. These countries would go to the Security Council as our delegates. They go there to represent our views, not to just bring their own views. The views of the African Union, democratically agreed. They should only take the positions given to them by the African Union, not their own individual positions. If we had such arrangements, mistakes like what happened in Libya would not have happened. Because I remember on the issue of Libya, I was a member of the Committee of 5. I hear rumor that I'm still a member, although it never meets. There was a Committee of 5 on Libya. I think chaired by Jacob Zuma, or either Jacob Zuma or Sassou Nguesso, who were members of that committee to bring peace in Libya, and we were going to do it. And actually, at that time, I didn't go, but I sent a representative, and the African leaders were in the aircraft going from, I think, Mauritania to Libya in the air. When they were told, go back, Libya is being attacked. Can you imagine? African leaders, former colonials are attacking an African country against the wish of the African Union. This is a very big mistake for this generation to accept. Very big mistake. Now you see the chaos which came from that. So who is accountable for these crimes? These are crimes against humanity, which they keep talking about. But if we had been in the Security Council, actually some of the African countries were there, but they took their own position, which was not correct. Our collective, we had met in Addis, we had said, keep out of Libya, we shall settle it. But some of the people did not listen. But if we had been there with the orders of the African Union, that one would not have happened. Or if the majority of the African Unions had supported intervention, then the attack would have happened with our consent. Now, there is another confusion, trying to use the side of the economy to decide who should be in the Security Council, who should represent Africa. They come and take measurements. Who is fat now? They bring a tape measure to see who is fat now, who is the fattest. But the one who is fat now may be small tomorrow. And the one who is small may be fat tomorrow. This confusion must stop. And selfishness, we're wasting our time. Germany's economy is now bigger than either the economy of UK or France. So what do we do now? We should remove France and UK from Security Council and put Germany, because Germany has got a big economy now. What logic is this? And what are you looking for? All these African countries, these economies are, that's why we call them underdeveloped. They have a big potential. This size you see, economy, Uganda, this now, is not the size of, it is like a young child. When you say a young child, you say, this is the size of the child. This is a young child. He will grow and become a giant. So that should not be waste our time. Finally, it is time to bring to the high table the defeated belligerents of the Second World War, Germany and Japan. You know, those fellows are out. Germany, because this UN system is for those who won the second inter-imperialist war, but supported by Russia. Russia was a big player. Although it was not among the club, but it actually did the biggest fighting against Hitler for their own reasons. So these are the ones who are in that Security Council. The defeated fellows are out. Germany, Japan. and Italy. Italy, of course, had also been part of that. But in my opinion, this should now come. Why? We want reconciliation and forget past mistakes. Why do you continue to punish a student of imperialism and aggression when you have never punished the teacher, the actual imperialist countries as per 1900? Because the imperialist countries who colonized us, the position of Germany and Japan was a question. Because see, the First World War and the Second World War were started by the new imperialist powers. When Germany was unified in 1871, became one country. Germans were not one country. There were 39 kingdoms actually, scattered. Prussia, Bavaria, Saxony. Then they had a pan-German movement to unite Germany, and then eventually they got united in 1871. So they became strong, so they were united. Now, the mistake they made was to compete. Then Italy was united in 1860. But by that time, the other imperialist countries, Britain, France, Portugal, Spain, had already grabbed different parts of the world. India, South America, the United States itself. So these new imperialists, they came, this is unfair. You have got more slaves than me. What should I do? I also need slaves. This is how the war started, the First World War. Actually, the old imperialists tried to pacify Germany. So they called a conference in Berlin, 1884, 1885. They were called, Bismarck actually is the one who called it. You come. I also need a share of the colonial possessions. So they say, please, Germany, don't fight. Let's give you something. They gave Germany Tanganyika, Rwanda, Burundi, Namibia, Togo, I think. Say, please, you take this, don't fight. And Bismarck seemed to have kept quiet. But other groups in Germany said, no. What do you mean? You give us Tanganyika and Rwanda. When you have got the whole of India, we also need more. That's how the First World War started. And then the second one. So the Germans were trying to copy the example of Britain and France and Portugal and Belgium and so you cannot punish the student and you forget about the teacher when you have not punished the teacher. Because the question was, why should UK, France, Portugal, Belgium, etc. have colonies and we do not have, yet we are now powerful countries? This was the argument. But the other weakness was ourselves. This one you should not forget. The other weakness, it was also the shallowness and the refusal of our chiefs to change that created the internal weaknesses that lured the wicked. You should not forget that. Like for instance here in East Africa, this is why I will never forgive our chiefs here, our traditional leaders. You remember Vasco da Gama went around Cape Town in 1498 and landed on Christmas Day in now what is now called Natal in South Africa. And he continued from there. He came and bombarded Mombasa and went to India. This is 1498. So our wonderful chiefs here in the interior of East Africa knew that a new powerful group of people are coming. You wonder why they could not get together and prepare to defend us. Just full of themselves, putting on monkey skins, looking like clowns, saying they are powerful like lions when they are nothing. So you can imagine Vasco da Gama passes by our coast 1498. The first white man to come here. For us, we had never seen a white man. The first non-black person to come here was an Arab called Ibrahim in 1841. We had never seen a non-black person. So when the Ugandans saw it, they said he had no skin. They thought that he was just, because they knew that people with skins must be black. The first white man to come here is 1862. Huntington Peak. This is 364 years from the time of Vasco da Gama. What were these wonderful chiefs doing? Knowing that danger is coming, but doing nothing, just showing off with big stomachs and so on. This is part of the problem. So as we quarrel with the whites, with the foreigners, we should also look at our own issues, our internal weaknesses. It is therefore high time we forget all the mistakes of the past and have a new dispensation of equality and security. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. I now do, what do I do now? Huh? I opened the meeting.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that your usual enlightening and informative speech. We continue learning from you, Excellency, from every time you make a speech. In spite of going to university and having master's degrees and working in government for long years, many of us continue learning a lot of history of Africa and world history from you. So we are so delighted. Let's give Your Excellency the President another hand clap. Your Excellency, the next item is, I'm just going to ask for the national anthem to be played. Then I'll ask the head delegations and ambassadors to come and for a photo session. Then the Excellency will leave, and we'll have a short break and start our meeting of ministers. May I ask us to stand up, and can we have the national anthem, please? Thank you. Protocol, can you assist in the photo arrangement? Madam? Heads of delegation, please can you move forward to take photos of the president, please?